Okay, we're now going to talk about the accessory exocrine glands. That's the liver, the gallbladder, and the pancreas. We're going to start with the liver. The liver is commonly said to be the largest organ in the body, if you don't count the skin. And it's located in the right upper quadrant. Why don't you feel your own right upper quadrant? All right? Just feel it. Because if that's enlarged or if it's painful, then there's a problem in the liver. Now, we wrote that the liver consists of two lobes, two major lobes, separated by what's called the falciform ligament. Let's see a picture of this. We're going to say CJ37. So on J37 is a picture of the human liver. And this is a view from the front, the anterior side. So right up here you'll notice the falciform ligament that separates the large right lobe from the smaller left lobe. Notice this is the large right lobe, this is the smaller left lobe. Now remember, you'd say, well, like, why does it say this right and this is the left? Well, you know, remember, I'm holding up my right hand. I know it may be on your left side, but you're looking at me from the front, and this is my right hand. And my right lobe would be on this side, my left lobe would be on this side. So when you're looking at somebody at the front view, and they're facing opposite to you, so their right and left are the opposite of yours. Do you realize how many mistakes have been made in every area of medicine? Because people said, oh, my right hand, so they have a problem with their right kidney. Okay, remember, make sure it's your patient's right and left, not your right or left. We're interested in the patient, not you. Now, having said that, let's look at the bottom picture. The bottom picture is the same liver viewed from the back. This is a back view. Now, so this was, let's make a note, this was the anterior, and it says anterior. Right, everybody see it says anterior right there, front. Anterior means the front. And this is the back side, the posterior. It says it. The bottom picture. Now you might say, okay, so what's the point? Who cares? Look at this. This is my right hand, right? If you're looking at me from the back, so we're both facing the same direction, now my right corresponds with your right. All right? Because we're both facing the same way. You're looking at me from the back. So, in this picture, this is the right lobe, this whole thing here, and this is the left lobe. Okay? So now, the right and left correspond with your right and left, because we're looking at it from the back side. It's not complicated, but just got to make sure you remember that. All right? Now, this is a view from the back side of the liver, and it's not only the back side, but it's the underside. So it's postero-inferior. Postero-inferior is technically the anatomic term. So look, we see this really large right lobe. We see this smaller left lobe. And here on the underside of the right lobe, first of all, here is the gallbladder. This is the gallbladder. It looks like an avocado. Okay, and that's the gallbladder right there. And it normally is green. Actually, it says it right here. You'll notice that right next to the gallbladder is a small lobe on the underside of the right lobe called the inferior quadrate lobe. And right up here, there's the superior caudate lobe. This is on the underside. Now, there's also this area called the Porta Hepatis. And what's the Porta Hepatis? This is where a whole three tubes are carrying stuff either into the liver or out of the liver. 3 different tubes. That's occurring at the Porta Hepatis. Why do they call it Porta Hepatis? Because hepatis means liver, and this is where things are being transported in or out of the liver. On J35, there is this large right lobe, and there is the smaller left lobe. But we've said that on the underside, that means the inferior side, on the underside of the large right lobe, there is the inferior quadrate lobe, there is the Porta Hepatis, and there is the superior caudate lobe. And of course, there's also the gallbladder, which I didn't write down. All right. Now, what is the Porta Hepatis? We said there were 3 tubes that are carrying stuff into or out of the liver at the Porta Hepatis. This is a hepatic artery, hepatic portal vein, and common hepatic bile duct. To help you understand this, let's make a note. We're going to see page J40. CJ40. Okay, on J40, so this is kind of like a transparent view of the liver. This is the liver. And right here it says Porta Hepatis. And we said there were 3 tubes carrying stuff into or out of the liver at the Porta Hepatis. So what are they? One of the tubes that's carrying something is something called the hepatic artery. Now, what is the hepatic artery carrying? It's carrying oxygenated blood. It brings oxygenated blood to the liver. So the arrow indicates that the oxygenated blood is flowing to the liver. What else is carrying something in or out of the liver? Something called the hepatic portal vein. And we've already mentioned the hepatic portal vein previously. The hepatic portal vein, we had learned previously, is carrying blood high in nutrients. It's absorbed from the digestive tract to the liver. So this is also going to the liver. Let's take a fast look at a previous page, specifically page J31. J31. I'll make a note. CJ31. CJ31. And this was J31. Everybody remember this? We learned last class meeting that all of the water-soluble nutrients that were absorbed into the bloodstream from the stomach and intestines were carried by the hepatic portal vein where? To the liver. So this is all these nutrients that were absorbed from the digestive tract are being carried to the liver by the hepatic portal vein. Let's go back to the picture we were at. So here's the previous picture. This is J40. So, so far, we've got a hepatic artery bringing oxygenated blood to the liver, hepatic portal vein bringing blood high in nutrients from the digestive tract to the liver, and one third tube. The third tube is the bile duct. So we know that the bile duct is bringing bile. Bile is produced by the liver. And this bile produced by the liver is going out of the liver. Where's it being carried to? It's being carried to the duodenum of the small intestine. The bile enters the duodenum so that the fats that we've eaten in our food can be emulsified. So back on J35. So what were these 3 tubes again? The hepatic artery, that's carrying oxygenated blood to the liver. Hepatic portal vein, this is blood with nutrients. Water-soluble nutrients absorbed from the digestive tract. And the bile ducts carry bile to the duodenum. Okay, so those are the 3 tubes associated with the liver. So on J38, so we're now going to talk about the functions of the liver. We said that the liver is commonly described as the largest organ in the body. And it is, in fact, a giant biochemical factory. It's involved in all kinds of biochemical, what's the good clinical word for biochemical? Good, metabolic, metabolism, all kinds of metabolic reactions. And so as we enumerate what the liver does, you have a much better understanding of why, if somebody has liver disease, it's very serious, because the liver has a lot of very important things that it does. So the first thing we talked about last time is it's involved in carbohydrate metabolism. And so we said that the sugars that are carried to the liver, and we know, in fact, that all these water-soluble nutrients that are absorbed from the digestive tract are carried directly by the hepatic portal vein directly to the liver. And if you're thinking, what did he just say? What's the hepatic portal vein? So we talked about that previously. You do need to keep up, but the picture that we showed you of the hepatic portal vein was J31. So on J31, this was J31, we saw that all the nutrients absorbed from the digestive tract are carried by the hepatic portal vein right to the liver. Incidentally, also on this picture, you'll notice it shows not only the hepatic portal vein, but it also shows the hepatic artery. Because we have learned that there are two blood vessels that carry blood to the liver. The hepatic artery is carrying blood high in oxygen. The hepatic portal vein is carrying not blood high in oxygen. In fact, it's low in oxygen, but it is carrying blood high in nutrients that are been absorbed from the digestive tract. Now, you might say, when did you tell us that? When did you tell us about the hepatic artery carrying oxygenated blood to the liver in the hepatic portal vein? Well, in fact, we told you that on page J37. I'm sorry, J35. On J35, we identified, when we were talking about the anatomy of the liver, that the hepatic artery carries oxygenated blood to the liver, and the hepatic portal vein carries blood with nutrients from the digestive tract to the liver. I think that's pretty straightforward. In addition, in this area called the Porta Hepatis, there are the bile ducts carrying bile away from the liver. You'd say, did you have a picture showing us that? Yes, we did. We saw a picture on J40. We looked at this last time. On J40, this picture shows, here's the hepatic artery bringing oxygenated blood to the liver. Here's the hepatic portal vein bringing nutrients from the digestive tract to the liver. And here's the bile ducts carrying bile away from the liver to the duodenum of the small intestine. So yeah, we've covered it. We've talked about it. It's all laid out for you. There's pictures. You just have to learn it. So make sure you do know it. It is important. Anyhow,
is there a picture of the liver that we need for the test, or no?
Everything that we show you is a possible picture.
Certain pictures we need to know.
Yes, the ones on J30, exact page. Yeah. J20,
no, J15 and 16.
Yeah, J37. Definitely no J37. Okay, so on so on J38, so we said that the sugars that are carried to the liver can be stored as a polysaccharide called glycogen. And the name of this process of joining glucose molecules together to form the polysaccharide called glycogen is called glycogenesis. In fact, there's a hormone that promotes or causes this process to happen, and the name of that hormone is insulin. So, in fact, what effect does insulin therefore have on the amount of sugar in the bloodstream? It lowers it. Causes the sugar that's in the bloodstream to be stored in the liver as glycogen. Now, there's also another hormone that does the opposite of insulin that promotes the breakdown of glycogen back into glucose and the release of that sugar back into the bloodstream. The name of the hormone is called glucagon, and it causes the glycogen to be broken apart into glucose, and the name of that process is glycogenolysis. So that has what effect then on the blood sugar level? That raises the blood sugar level. So insulin and glucagon are the two hormones that regulate our blood sugar level.
Huh? A question about glucagon and epinephrine. Like they have those pens that when people have like a diabetes, they inject the EpiPen or the
No, when they have diabetes, they inject insulin. EpiPen is used for an anaphylactic shock reaction.
If they have hypoglycemia, do they give?
No, no,
Glucagon?
no, they eat sugar.
Oh.
You don't have to give epinephrine, you try giving them sugar.
When you give them glucagon?
They don't.
They don't give it?
They don't usually. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
All right, so another thing your liver is involved in is lipid metabolism. It's involved in manufacturing fats and also breaking down fats. And so among the fats that it manufactures or forms are phospholipids and cholesterol. Cholesterol is actually made from saturated fatty acids that we ingest in our diet. Letter C, another thing that our liver does is protein metabolism. Again, metabolism just means biochemical reactions. Our liver is involved in the manufacture of proteins and also in the breakdown of proteins. So among the proteins that our liver makes are albumin and blood clotting proteins. Now, we've certainly heard of blood clotting proteins, or at least the term blood clotting factors. Your liver makes all these proteins, these factors or proteins that are needed for blood clotting, among other things. And these include proteins called prothrombin and fibrinogen. If you've heard those names, fine. If you haven't, you'll certainly hear about them in physiology. But these are known as blood clotting factors or blood clotting proteins. So your liver takes the amino acids that were carried in the hepatic portal vein right to the liver and joins them together to form these proteins. The first protein I mentioned is albumin. That's made by your liver. It's also secreted into the bloodstream. It also is carried in the bloodstream, just like these blood clotting proteins. Some of you, when you hear that name albumin, you might be thinking, albumin, isn't that like egg whites? And in fact, it is. That's the protein in egg whites. Did we talk about this last time? So we mentioned, let me just raise the question that we did ask last time. So if you ate a whole bunch of food containing egg whites, and we gave the example of lemon meringue pie, so does the albumin level necessarily increase in your body? No, because we don't absorb albumin. We only absorb amino acids. So we've talked about how you are not what you eat. Okay, if you eat chicken, you don't turn into a chicken. And if you eat bananas, you don't become a banana. All right? So because you only digest those foods into basic building blocks, and you reassemble those nutrients into human chemicals. Our liver is also involved in breaking down old proteins, and it breaks down old proteins first into amino acids and then into a waste product called urea. And this urea is then excreted in our urine. In fact, it is the major organic waste that is in our urine. Letter D, another thing our liver does is stores vitamins and minerals. Again, I remind you, all the nutrients absorbed from our digestive tract are carried by that hepatic portal vein right to the liver, and that's where these nutrients are largely processed and stored, including vitamins and minerals. Another thing our liver does, on page J38, letter E, is the breakdown of old erythrocytes. What are erythrocytes? Red blood cells. So your liver breaks down old red blood cells. There are macrophages, large phagocytes in your liver that break down erythrocytes or red blood cells. And I summarized that the hemoglobin that's in our red blood cells is actually split apart into heme and globin, which is kind of cute. And the globin, anytime you have that word globin or globulin, it just means protein. So globin is just broken apart into amino acids, and the heme is turned into bilirubin. So bilirubin is actually formed from the breakdown of hemoglobin. And this bilirubin, this greenish yellow chemical, is then secreted with the bile. It's what gives bile its greenish yellow color. Now, to help you understand this better, let's look at a diagram on page, and I've written it right here, M5. So if we turn to page M5, so on the top of M5 is a diagram where we can summarize what we've just said. First of all, let's start right up here at the top left. At the very top left, it shows a vertebra. And right above the vertebra it has the word erythropoiesis. Now, if the name of a red blood cell is an erythrocyte, the production of erythrocytes is called erythropoiesis. So red blood cells, erythrocytes, are made in our bone marrow. Which bones, as an adult, are most important in producing red blood cells? Okay, the sternum, the ribs, the rib cage, and our vertebral column. So that's why it's got a vertebra. So you say, when did you say that again? I didn't write it down. It's on page E1 at the bottom. We needed to know that for the first exam. So you should know which bones produce most of our blood cells as an adult. The rib cage or the vertebral column. Anyhow, it shows these red blood cells, and they circulate in our bloodstream. Here they are. And then what it shows right here is a large macrophage. You'd say, a what? This is a large cell. Here's the nucleus of this cell. And these large cells are called macrophages, large big eaters. Where are they located? As it says on your right, they are in our spleen, our liver, and our bone marrow. So they are in our liver, among other places. And what do these large macrophages do? They swallow up aged, abnormal, and damaged erythrocytes. So the old damaged red blood cells are swallowed up by these macrophages that are inside your liver and inside your spleen and even inside your bone marrow, but mostly in your liver. What do they do? Now, the major chemical that's in a red blood cell is a reddish protein called hemoglobin. I actually talked about that when we were dealing with comparing myoglobin with hemoglobin. So hemoglobin is a reddish protein. So these macrophages swallow up these very small red blood cells. And I might just mention that red blood cells, we've already learned this, red blood cells are unique in what way? Very good. They have no nucleus. They have no nucleus. They're the only cells in our body that have no nucleus. Are there any cells in our body that have more than one nucleus? Yes, skeletal muscle cells. So we learned that already for the most recent exam. So, but red blood cells have normal circulating red blood cells have no nucleus. Therefore, they only live about 4 months, and then they die. So they only live about 4 months. And the macrophages swallow them up, and they take the hemoglobin, the major chemical that's inside of a red blood cell, and they split it apart into heme and globin. The globin, which means protein, is broken apart into amino acids, and the heme is actually what gives hemoglobin its reddish color. The heme is split apart into iron and bilirubin. You'd say, well, I'm confused. What do you mean? What gives hemoglobin, or heme, its reddish color is the iron. Have we ever talked about that before? Yeah. So the iron is removed from the heme, and what's left is called bilirubin. So bilirubin is literally heme of the hemoglobin minus the iron. When it has the iron, it's reddish in color. Without the iron, it becomes greenish yellow in color. Now, the iron can be recycled. So the iron can actually be transported back to the bone marrow and reused to make new hemoglobin inside new red blood cells. The bilirubin is secreted by the liver with the bile. We know that our liver produces this green soap called bile, and what gives it its greenish color is the greenish bilirubin. So bilirubin is literally a kind of byproduct of breaking down old red blood cells in our liver. Right? So back on J38, So here's how I summarized what I've just said. The hemoglobin is split apart in your liver into heme and globin. The globin is broken apart into amino acids. The heme is turned into bilirubin and secreted with the bile. And that takes us to a sixth function of our liver, letter F, the production of bile. Our liver produces about 700 milliliters of bile a day. I'm not going to test you on how many milliliters of bile our liver produces each day. We've already learned previously that bile is mostly made out of fats, its function is to emulsify fats. It acts like a soap, like the original Simple Green, and it emulsifies fats. Letter G, another function of our liver is involved in the catabolism. Now, you should have learned the word catabolism in biology. It means the breakdown. Just think of catastrophic, where everything's broken down, breaks apart. So it is involved in the breakdown of hormones, toxins, alcohol, and drugs. Our liver is commonly called our detox organ. It detoxifies. It breaks down toxins. You'd say, what are toxins? Anything that's harmful to us. It breaks down hormones. It breaks down alcohol and drugs. When I'm on the weekend, so when I'm getting totally smashed with booze, so how come after a few hours I feel the effects are wearing off and I need to drink more? That's because my liver is breaking down the alcohol. Also, if you take any medicine, how come after a few hours you need to take more of the medicine? That's because your liver breaks down those medicines. So our liver is involved in the breakdown of all kinds of things. Now, I have not listed everything your liver does, but just knowing this much would help explain why your liver is such a very important organ. So if your liver is sick, all of these things that we just mentioned that your liver does aren't going to be happening.
There was a question asked last week about what if the gallbladder's removed?
We're going to get to that.
Okay.
We haven't talked about the gallbladder yet. Okay, so on J39, disorders associated with the liver. So we'll just mention a few. Hepatitis. Itis means an infection. So an infection of the liver. And there are all kinds of liver infections. There are bacterial infections of the liver. There are at least 4 or 5 different types of viral infections of the liver. Some of you have heard of hepatitis B. There's hepatitis A, hepatitis C, hepatitis D. These are different viral infections. Now remember, if your liver is sick, is it going to be able to carry out all these functions that it's supposed to do? No. Do you think it's going to carry them out 100% like normal if it's sick? No. So that means it's going to have impaired. All of these roles of the liver will be reduced. OMA. What is hepatoma? What does OMA mean? It means a tumor. Yeah, we learned that on the top of page A4. If you don't believe me, all you have to do is look at the top of page A4. You wrote in your own handwriting, OMA means tumor. Anybody who doesn't believe me could check. All right, so this is a tumor of the liver. Obviously, you could have a benign tumor. You could have a malignant tumor. Malignant tumor is also another way of saying cancer. Obviously, again, if there's tumors, cancer of the liver, this is very serious because of all the important roles of the liver. What is cirrhosis of the liver? There are really many causes of cirrhosis, but the cause that people are most familiar with is consuming too much alcohol. Now, we had mentioned that your liver breaks down stuff, but really what I should have said better is that your liver breaks down and converts stuff into other stuff. So what your liver actually does with alcohol is it converts it into fat. And that's why alcoholic drinks are considered so fattening, because people who are drinking a lot of alcohol are accumulating a lot of fat in their liver. Let me just, one more comment on this concept. A lot of students, when they hear that your body breaks down something, they think that it turns something into nothing. That is impossible based on the laws of chemistry and physics. There's a concept called conservation of mass and energy. Let me give you an example. If you had a candle and you light the candle, well, as the candle burns, all the wax disappears, and it looks like all that wax turned into nothing. But in fact, that wax has been turned into carbon dioxide, water vapor, light, and heat energy. And if you simply added up all the carbon dioxide and water vapor that was released from the candle and the light and heat energy, it would add up to the same weight as the wax of the candle. All right? That's called the conservation of mass and energy. So when we say it breaks down something, it really turns something into something else. And in this case, it's turning alcohol into fat. So cirrhosis of the liver is when the liver becomes filled with a lot of fat. And when it's all engorged and filled with fat and scar tissue, it doesn't function properly. So people who are on a high alcohol diet have a cirrhotic liver. Now, whenever you have illness to the liver, whether it's hepatitis, cirrhosis, hepatoma, so that commonly is accompanied by jaundice. And we know that jaundice is associated with hyperbilirubinemia. We needed to know that for their second exam. Elevated levels of bilirubin in the bloodstream. And this elevated levels of this greenish yellow chemical called bilirubin causes a yellowing of the skin and even the whites of the eye. So basically what we're saying is anytime there's problems with the liver, bilirubin starts to kind of, increased amounts of bilirubin start to be released into the bloodstream, causing jaundice. Let me give you a few causes, specific causes though, of jaundice. The first one is anytime there's an increase in red blood cell destruction. So anytime that your body, for whatever reason, is breaking down red blood cells at a faster rate than normal, that leads to jaundice. You'd say, yeah, like why? Well, we already talked about this. You'd say, what do you mean? We had the picture on M5, and on M5, didn't we say that when you break down red blood cells, don't you form bilirubin? Now, what if your body was breaking down red blood cells at a faster rate than normal? Then you would form increased amounts of bilirubin. And forming increased amounts of bilirubin might tend to cause hyperbilirubinemia and jaundice. Now, there are actually many reasons why your body might be breaking down red blood cells at a faster rate than normal. But the most common of these happens at birth. When a baby is born, there is an increased rate in the breakdown of red blood cells. So this increased rate of breakdown of red blood cells forms increased amounts of bilirubin, and that increased bilirubin tends to lead to what's commonly called neonatal jaundice, because the red blood cells are being broken down, forming increased amounts of bilirubin. Now you'd say, well, why? Why at birth is the body breaking down red blood cells at a faster rate than normal? I'll give you part of the reason. Part of the reason is that a fetus actually has a higher red blood cell count than the baby requires after it's born. When the baby is actually able to breathe on its own, it doesn't need as many red blood cells as it did when it was living inside the womb. So because it doesn't need as many red blood cells after it's born, there's an increased rate in the breakdown of red blood cells, and that leads to increased amounts of bilirubin and this jaundice. And I would say about a third of the babies born tend to develop noticeable neonatal jaundice. Yep.
Oh, so then basically after they go through that process and their red blood cell count like kind of normalizes and goes away?
That's right. The jaundice usually goes away on its own. They have found many years ago that they can get rid of that yellowing of the skin faster by putting them under tanning lights. These are called bili lights. And they put them under these UV tanning lights, and that breaks down the bilirubin in their skin. There's more going on to this. Technically, the hemoglobin that is found in fetal red blood cells is different than the hemoglobin found in red blood cells produced after you're born. The hemoglobin that's produced after you're born is called hemoglobin A, but the hemoglobin that's found in a fetal cells is called hemoglobin F, and it's got a different affinity for oxygen. So literally the body starts making a different type of hemoglobin in the red blood cells. So there's a lot of other things going on. Huh?
Why is that considered like dangerous? Or,
It's not considered dangerous.
well, it's not considered dangerous?
No.
It's not a problem?
It's
Every time
almost never a problem.
I used to
I'm saying
take,
in babies,
It's not a problem.
so why don't we do the grades?
That's a religious reason.
There's no medical reason for it?
It's just better not to do it, but it's I can't imagine anything fatal. But you're talking about a religious ritual. Okay, so there are all kinds of rules on that.
when I worked for a pediatrician, whenever the hospital would call with a new baby, they would give you the bili count.
Mm-hmm.
And so they would, then they would give instructions if the bili count was too high,
Yeah, what were the instructions?
probably to put them under the lamps.
Yeah.
Or
That just breaks it down.
yeah, you would call the doctor and they would say, lay him on the bed in the sunshine
That's
next to
right.
the window.
Did the doctor seem overly concerned?
No.
No. So it's
What
not.
if-
It's
what
not
if they
really an
didn't
issue.
do anything?
Huh?
What if they didn't do anything?
Probably nothing. It would basically, again, adjust on its own. This is just part of the increased red blood cell breakdown that happens at birth. It happens in all babies.
It's never a risk.
All right, so,
If, one question.
Yep.
Jaundice happens in an adult, then it's a different story, and then it's going to be dangerous, right?
yeah, I'll tell you, there's another, again, I want you to know about neonatal jaundice, because I want you to know, because everybody always asks me about it, and it's common. But there is a more serious type of, where there's an increased red blood cell breakdown and increased production of bilirubin, known as hemolytic anemia. And an example of hemolytic anemia is called erythroblastosis fetalis, or Rh incompatibility. I don't want to get into all this. This is what you're going to be learning about in your medical programs. They're going to get into all the diseases. We're just trying to give you background so that you understand where you're going with this. So. Now, another example is infectious hepatitis. Again, whenever there's damage to the liver, infection of the liver, diseases of the liver, that there tends to be a spillover of the bilirubin into the bloodstream, leading to jaundice. Another cause, and this one should be really easy to understand, is a blockage or an obstruction of the bile ducts. Let's look on the next page, on J40. You'll be able to visualize this. So we know that bile on J40 is supposed to flow from the liver. Where? Where's it going to? Through the bile ducts where? It's going to the duodenum of the small intestine. What if there's a blockage in the bile ducts? You'd say, well, what do you mean? Such as a gallstone, which we'll get to. So if there's anything blocking the flow of bile, so the bile can't go to the duodenum, it backs up. And notice, right here at the top of the picture, can everybody see, here's a hepatic vein, and that hepatic vein connects to the inferior vena cava. It's okay, you can start learning this because we're moving into the circulatory system next. You're going to know all this stuff. So if there's a blockage in the bile duct, the bile starts to, since it can't go down to the small intestine, it backs up and it enters the bloodstream. And it enters the, and that causes jaundice when the bilirubin starts going into the bloodstream. So anytime there's diseases, disorders in the liver, the bile starts to go into the bloodstream. And that causes hyperbilirubinemia and manifested as jaundice. Okay, all of these things I've talked about are summarized at the bottom. Okay, there are many other causes of jaundice. As I have commonly said, and I've commonly said it because it's very true, everything in medicine is multifactorial. There is nothing simple about anything in medicine. Everything has multiple causes, and the task that every physician has, that the nurses have, is to figure out what the hell's going on, because it's complicated. Okay, let's talk about the gallbladder. So the gallbladder I wrote on J39 is kind of shaped like a pear, or an avocado, or whatever fruit you like. And it's located on the underside of the liver. And it holds up to 50 milliliters of bile. I'm not going to test you on how many milliliters of bile it holds. Now, under disorders associated with the gallbladder, what is cholecystitis? So at the bottom of the page, I wrote two bladders, urinary bladder and gallbladder. Now, we're going to be seeing both the urinary bladder and the gallbladder on the cat. And so we'll be testing you on both the urinary bladder and gallbladder on the cat, on the lab test, next lab test. Now, they're easy. This is not difficult to see a gallbladder or urinary bladder. But here's what I want to make sure you don't do. When you're writing down these things on the lab test, don't write the word bladder. Write the word gallbladder or urinary bladder. If you just write the word bladder, I don't know which bladder you mean. Now, what students, when they make that mistake, they say, come on, Professor Fink, you know that I knew that. You know that I knew which one it was. So if I know everything you know, just on the test, just write on the top of your test, you know what I know, and just turn it in. The problem is I have no idea what you know and don't know. So I can only grade you on what you write down. So make sure you write down urinary bladder or gallbladder. Don't just write bladder. A bladder is a sac. So so the urinary bladder is a sac that holds urine. The gallbladder is a sac that holds, and don't say gall, it holds bile. Some people say it holds gall. Gall is audacity, but anyhow. Now, when you have an infection of the urinary bladder, that's called cystitis. But when you have an infection of the gallbladder, that's called cholecystitis. I don't know exactly why. One possible thought is we know that bile is very high in cholesterol. And so maybe because of all the fats in bile, they call it cholecystitis, as in the word cholesterol. All right, so make sure you know the difference between cystitis and cholecystitis. Do you think that a nurse or even a doctor has ever made an error and written down the wrong one? And all of a sudden they're being treated for the wrong problem? So you got to be careful. And the medical field is a field where you should be a little OCD. Okay, obsessive compulsive. You want to double check, triple check. Has anybody ever gone to the hospital and seen how they keep checking the name tag? Because they've just screw up too many times where they give the wrong medication to the wrong patient. So they just keep checking that over and over and over again. They want to make sure they got the right person. All right, so we know what cholecystitis is. Now, what are gallstones? The clinical name for gallstones is Cholelithiasis. Now, the root lith means stone or rock. Lith is Greek for stone. So literally, these gallstones are called cholelithiasis. So what does that do? To help us understand that, let's look at a picture. Go back here for a second. Yeah, let's go back to J27. J27. And on J27, so this was our picture here. Here's the gallbladder, kind of looking like an avocado. And we said that it holds bile. And I actually even drew in here some gallstones. The gallstones form in the gallbladder. That's where they form. Now, what are they? The analogy I'd like to suggest is if you've got some soft soap at home, you know, the soft soap that you pump, you know, the liquid soap. Imagine this soft soap or liquid soap's been in that bottle a long time, and some of that soft or liquid soap starting to solidify into little blobs at the bottom. Can you imagine that? So now let's imagine that somebody's got bile, which is mostly fat, isn't it? Just like soap. It's like soap. So imagine they've got this bile, which is kind of high in fats, sitting in this gallbladder, and some of it starts to solidify into these little blobs, these little clumps of solidified bile. Those are called gallstones. Now, as long as the gallstones remain in the gallbladder, there's no problem. The problem happens if the gallstone starts to come out of the gallbladder and then it wedges and gets stuck in a bile duct, and now it's blocking the flow of bile in the bile duct. So when somebody gets a gallstone obstructing or blocking the flow of bile in a bile duct, number one, that causes excruciating pain. It's very painful. And the bile, as we've learned, is going to start backing up into the liver. And that bile, with the bilirubin, is going to spill into the bloodstream, causing jaundice. But the most immediate problem is the pain. So what they'll do, if there's a gallstone right here stuck, wedged, stuck right in a bile duct, they have to surgically go in and remove it. Now, some students will say, well, wait a second, can't they? Why don't they just use ultrasound and break it apart? Don't confuse gallstones with kidney stones. Kidney stones, don't confuse a gallbladder with a urinary bladder. Don't confuse a gallstone with a kidney stone. A kidney stone is calcareous. It's like a little rock that can be shattered with ultrasound. But this is made out of fat. A gallstone is fatty in nature. It's soft. It's fatty. You cannot shatter it. It has to be surgically removed. So they will surgically remove the gallstone. Now, at least in years past, they would remove the gallstone, But then, if a few years later, the person again had gallstones obstructing the flow of their bile duct, well, you can't have abdominal surgery every few years. So what they would do is they would remove the gallbladder. So, Catherine, there's your question. Okay, they would remove the gallbladder. In fact, I've been told nowadays, even when somebody has gallstones the first time, they may remove their gallbladder.
So where does the bile go?
Okay, so if they remove the gallbladder, they have no way of storing the bile. So basically the bile will continuously dribble down the bile duct into the duodenum. And they will basically make it so that the bile just dribbles into the small intestine continuously. There's no harm in that. It just means that normally we would only want to have the bile come into the duodenum when you've got food in there. So in this case it can't. The main problem is not that the bile is dribbling into the duodenum all the time. The big problem is that when you eat food high in fats, let's say you've got, buttered bread with all that butter. So normally, when that butter comes in here, the gallbladder contracts and spurts a whole bunch of extra bile into your duodenum where they don't have a way of storing extra bile. So what do you think the doctors would tell that patient who has had their gallbladder removed as far as their eating habits? Not to eat a lot of very fat food, because they don't have a way of releasing a lot of bile all at once. So they are told to avoid eating meals rich in fats.
Now, can gallstones be brought on by a high fatty diet?
No, it's genetic. It's like diabetes or it's like gout. We have said that what you eat does not cause the problem, but what you eat can make the problem worse. Right? It's genetic. Because there are plenty of people who eat plenty of fats or don't eat fats and they never have gallstones. Okay, so that's all right. So again, in terms of another picture on J40, same idea. Again, if you get these gallstones obstructing the flow of bile in a bile duct, the bile flows backwards up into the liver and enters the bloodstream, as we said. All right, so much for the gallbladder. Is everybody okay on this gallbladder? That takes us to the last organ of the digestive system, the pancreas, on J41. Yeah.
So you can prevent it for building gallstones?
Is there any prevention? No. No, not really. You either tend to get them or you don't. And if you tend to get them, they remove your gallbladder. And if you don't get them, that's not a problem. All right, so the pancreas is about a 6-inch long organ located in the loop formed by the duodenum. Well, again, we've had many pictures showing this. In this picture on J27, here's the pancreas fitting right into the loop of the duodenum, and it's located right underneath the stomach is where the pancreas is. You had a good picture on that page just before J1, the picture just before J1. Looking at the pancreas on J41, so this is called the head of the pancreas, the body of the pancreas, and the tail of the pancreas. Running along the length of the pancreas is the pancreatic duct, and that carries pancreatic juice rich in digestive enzymes and sodium bicarbonate to the duodenum. Now, we remind you that the pancreas is a unique organ. It is both an endocrine gland and an exocrine gland. Now, you'll notice that I think I drew these on your picture. I drew some circles right here. These circles that I drew on the pancreas represent what are called pancreatic islets. A pancreatic islet. And they're called pancreatic islets, islet meaning like a little island or cluster of cells. The older name for the pancreatic islet were the islets of Langerhans, named after Dr. Langerhans. Not to be confused with the island of Dr. Moreau, which is something else, but anyhow. So at the microscopic level, this circular picture, and we will see, we're not doing lab today, But on Wednesday, we're going to do lab, and we're going to have under the microscope the pancreas. You're going to see a picture just like this, okay? Picture, an actual microscope view. So what you're looking at right here is a pancreatic islet, or islet of Langerhans, and it is made up of special cells that secrete hormones into the bloodstream. There are two types of cells in the pancreatic islets, alpha cells and beta cells. Let's talk about those. At the bottom, so where it says microanatomy of the pancreas, so the endocrine pancreas are the islets of Langerhans, or pancreatic islets. So what are the pancreatic islets, or islets of Langerhans? Those are the cells. They are made up of the cells that secrete hormones into the bloodstream. The alpha cells secrete glucagon. The beta cells secrete insulin. You'd say, like, do we have to know that? Yes. The alpha cells, beta cells secrete insulin. The alpha cells secrete glucagon. So that's the endocrine part of the pancreas. Have we talked about what insulin and glucagon do? Yeah, in fact, that's how I began the lecture today. Now, this was back on J38, just to remind you. On J38, today, we talked about it last class meeting. I began class today by reminding you insulin is the hormone carried in the bloodstream, and it affects the liver cells. And it causes the liver cells to join glucose molecules together into a polysaccharide called glycogen. That's called glycogenesis. Glucagon is the hormone secreted by the alpha cells of the pancreatic islets into the bloodstream that affects the liver cells and causes glycogenolysis. How is it possible that these hormones, insulin and glucagon, specifically affect liver cells? I mean, if they're carried in the bloodstream and they're going everywhere, then how are they affecting liver cells? Receptor sites. There's insulin and glucagon receptor sites on the liver cells. There's also on other cells, but certainly on liver cells. So that's how these hormones secreted into the bloodstream are specifically affecting, among other things, the liver cells. So that's what these clusters, these pancreatic islets, are secreting these two hormones into the bloodstream. All the rest of the pancreas, these cells here surrounding the pancreatic islets, are cells of the exocrine pancreas. They are cells of the exocrine pancreas. You'd say, well, what does that mean? The exocrine pancreas secretes pancreatic juice, rich in digestive enzymes and sodium bicarbonate. Have we ever talked about this pancreatic juice before? Yeah, we talked all about it. You'd say, yeah, like what page? Page J28. On J28, we've covered this already. We spoke all about pancreatic juice containing digestive enzymes and sodium bicarbonate, and these enzymes included pancreatic amylase and trypsin and pancreatic lipase and pancreatic nucleases, and all of these were, going back to our picture, in this pancreatic juice carried through the pancreatic duct to the duodenum. So the majority of cells of the pancreas are the exocrine pancreas. So know that the pancreas is both an endocrine gland and an exocrine gland. The endocrine gland is really a bunch of scattered clusters of cells, scattered clumps of cells called pancreatic islets. All right, at the very bottom of J41, so what's pancreatitis? That's just an infection of the pancreas. And what's diabetes, or diabetes mellitus? So diabetes is, well, first of all, let me just say this. Diabetes is a complicated disorder. There are different types of diabetes. Everything in medicine is multifactorial. There's not just one type of diabetes. Remember how we learned there's not just one type of arthritis? There are different types of arthritis. We talked about rheumatoid arthritis and osteoarthritis and gouty arthritis. Well, there are different types of diabetes as well. But fundamentally, keeping it simple, diabetes is a deficiency of insulin. And so without insulin, insulin is what causes sugar to go into the liver cells and be joined together to form glycogen. So insulin lowers the amount of sugar in our bloodstream. So if you don't have enough insulin, you have no way of taking the sugar in the bloodstream and storing it as glycogen in the liver. So people who have low insulin levels, who have diabetes with low insulin levels, have very high blood sugar levels. They have hyperglycemia. Sugar levels are way too high. So when they take their shot of insulin, it actually lowers their blood sugar levels.